At the Smithsonian, we have everything from we have so many models of sewing machines. Now, you know, sewing and textile industry is so important in New York. There were so many people trying to invent sewing machines in that period, like the mid-1830s to the mid-1850s. The whole problem was how to attach two pieces of cloth together. You know, the growth of the cotton industry. You needed mass production for uniforms for the Civil War. First time you really needed that. You didn't have sizes before then. Before you had the sewing machine, you didn't have sizes. Sewing machines standardized and catapulted textile production. But all these models we have at the Smithsonian of ways of figuring out how to connect two pieces of cloth, it's amazing. We have a whole series of Edison light bulbs that he was experimenting with, Henry Ford's Model T, various versions of that. And then that little flying machine that those two bicycle guys from Ohio, who are probably supporting Kasich, built that's in the Smithsonian, that enabled us to fly. One of the items in my book is actually a building in New York. It's the Carnegie Mansion that now the Smithsonian runs as the Cooper Hewitt Museum. And the reason that's there is because of what it's made out of. Steel. That was the first building that was made out of steel girders, the I-beam or the H-beam. And that was later, Carnegie Steel was eclipsed. Carnegie Steel made the country. And then later eclipsed, Carnegie itself later eclipsed by Bethlehem Steel. But, you know, the consequence of that. So when we were restoring that building a few years ago, it was a pleasure for me to look into the guts of the building and actually see, you know, these pieces of steel stamped, you know, Carnegie from the 1890s that was used to make that. And of course, we have a city here of steel. Whoop. Oh, okay, time for the mystery quiz. What is it?
Diving bell.
A diving bell. Hey, that's pretty, how many people think it's a diving bell? That's good. Yeah, okay. That's wrong. Another idea? It makes beer. Oh, that's pretty good. A beer brewery? Anybody? Anybody else with a good guess? Washing machine? Yes. What do you think it is? A fire. Well, that's pretty good. Okay, so this was made. Oh, you got an idea? A projector. No. Okay, so this was made by some crazy guy in Yonkers, New York. And he made a bunch of these, and they kept blowing up in his garage in Yonkers. It drove people in Yonkers crazy. His name was Otto Bakelin. He was a Belgian immigrant to the United States, 1908, 1909. And what he was trying to make, this is called after him, a bakelizer. And what he was trying to make was plastic. This item is the birthplace of the polyester kingdom. This is what made Bakelite, the first commercial plastic. It is so, you know Bakelite, you know, remember Bakelite jewelry, and you had them on old TVs and radios and stuff? Yeah, they're orangey, brown, kind of ugly, but plastic. This was plastic, and we live in the age of plastic. Now this item, it's about this high. It is so ugly, we've never exhibited it at the Smithsonian, but it's so important. Okay, this one has a good story. And what you love about objects is they have stories. So everybody knows what that is, right? Right, a Brownie camera. It's not just any Brownie camera, it's Bernice Palmer's Brownie camera. Who was Bernice Palmer? Okay, so this is Bernice Palmer's Brownie camera. Brownie cameras came in the early 1900s. It was a way of democratizing the ability to document your life and your experience. Before that, if you wanted to take pictures, you needed to be a chemist, a scientist, a gentleman, you know, all the chemicals, the whole rigmarole to make a picture. But a Brownie camera, all you had to do was point and shoot. And so, and Kodak, which is a made-up name, basically marketed a lot of stuff to women. It was really, when you think about the early 1900s, it was really development of the women's movement, the women's suffrage movements, going back to the 1880s through, you know, obviously into the 1920s. But Kodak advertised a Kodak girl. And the idea that girls can just be part of society, they could go out and take pictures of anything and do it. And Bernice Palmer was a teenager in, what was it, about 1914, well, 1913, she became like 16. Anyway, her mother got her a Brownie camera for Christmas and then took her on a cruise. And she got on a ship called the Carpathia with her camera. And they were on the ship, and a few days out, they got a distress call from the Titanic. So the Carpathia sped to try to rescue people, get the survivors. Who on the ship had the camera? A teenage girl, 16-year-old Bernice Palmer. So it's her pictures. She took pictures of the iceberg, the only known picture of the iceberg that sunk the Titanic. Survivors, well, a series of them. When the Carpathia then docks in New York, everybody at the New York pier is like, who has pictures? Who has pictures? All the news service, who has pictures? That girl. It's like that old Marlo Thomas, that girl. And it's her pictures that go around the world that document this epic disaster. And so when we think today about people, some incident happens and people pull out their iPhones or something and see things, well, go talk to Bernice Palmer. And she was in her 80s when finally she donated her camera to the Smithsonian. And it was a wonderful thing. There was still film in it. Another wonderful story is Martha. So the Smithsonian had a tremendous collection of birds. It started out, one of my predecessors, the Undersecretary back in the 1850s, he was a student of Audubon. And he collected a lot of birds, to really document birds in the country. And, you go back to even Cartier and others, early documentation of America. There were probably about 50 billion passenger pigeons on this continent. Passenger pigeons ate everything. When you hear news reports, even in the 1800s, they used to publish reports of like the passenger pigeons. They would form columns about 5 miles wide and 100 miles long. And as they came through, they would darken the sky and they would eat everything in their path. Again, America as an agricultural country, people would shoot them, smoke them out, kill the passenger pigeons. And so what finally happened by the early 1900s, there were very few, the ornithological societies started offering rewards for the passenger pigeon. If you could show, if you had a passenger pigeon specimen. And by 1914, there were only 2 passenger pigeons left alive. They were both lived at the Cincinnati Zoo in retirement. One was named George, the other was named Martha. George preceded Martha to the great beyond, and Martha was the last passenger pigeon. And she died on September 1st, 1914. And so we know with the exact time, the exact date, when a species that had numbered in the tens, if not hundreds of billions, had ceased to exist on the planet. What they did at the Cincinnati Zoo, they put Martha on a 300-pound block of ice, got her on a railroad car, shipped her off to the Smithsonian, where we then separated the wet parts from the dry parts, which is something we do at the Smithsonian. But the Smithsonian has an amazing collection of birds. Again, if you go backstage, and I think people in the front can see it, that's pretty impressive, right? I mean, that's what it looks like backstage in a bird collection. Just imagine bays and bays of millions of bird samples. Now, so we collect these birds, and what started out as collecting them because of their plumage and because of their skeletal structure now has other consequences. So remember those 2 guys I mentioned from Ohio that developed a flying machine. Well, I'm sure everybody's heard of the Miracle on Hudson here, okay? So the U.S. Air Flight goes down, people rescued, nobody died. what happens is, whenever there's a bird strike, that happened because of a bird strike. And there's bird strikes every day in the United States. Whenever there's a bird strike, what they do, I hope everybody's had, well, if you haven't had dinner, it's tough luck. What they do from the engine after a bird strike is they scrape the bird pate from the engine, and they send it to the Smithsonian. And the reason they do that is so we at the Smithsonian can identify what kind of bird, what species, what subspecies may have hit the plane. The person who does that, we have a unit at the Smithsonian, they're called forensic ornithologists. The leader of that is a woman named, and I kid you not, Carla Dove. And Carla and her team take the bird remains from jets and basically figure out how to blame it on the Canadians. So what we then do is, in doing that, then know, like at LaGuardia, grow this foliage, or introduce these predators to that airport, or play bad music and project it, and whatever you got to do to keep away that species so it doesn't hit planes that you and I are flying on and cause a disaster. That grows out of the Smithsonian collection. Now, we have, if the Smithsonian were a musical instrument museum, we'd be the largest music museum in the world. Close to 20,000 musical instruments, scores of recordings, and so on. And we have items like this, Louis Armstrong's trumpet. There's another one in Queens here over at the Louis Armstrong Museum. And our collections don't just sit around, but they do things. So we had a recent thing, hard to see that photograph. We have a new boss at the Smithsonian. I have a new boss, new head of the Smithsonian, David Skorton. He was the president of Cornell. Did a lot of work here in the city, Cornell Medical School, Roosevelt Island. So he was going to get installed as the secretary of the Smithsonian, and he's actually plays a jazz musician. He's played flute at Lincoln Center. He plays with Wynton Marsalis and a few other people. So we were doing the installation. The Chief Justice of the United States is the Chancellor of the Smithsonian. He's going to give David Skorton, the new secretary, the key to the castle, the key to the Smithsonian. So we're going to have a ceremony. Chief Justice gets in touch with me. He says, Richard, you're going to have Wynton Marsalis there. He's going to play some jazz in honor of the, the new head of the Smithsonian. You have that Louis Armstrong trumpet. How about if you took that trumpet out of the case and let Wynton Marsalis play it? And so you had one son of New Orleans playing the trumpet of another son of New Orleans who have been instrumental, no pun intended, in our jazz heritage. Now, as it was, I was a little nervous about this because I was worried that when Wynton Marsalis came and showed up, we had a 1940 Louis Armstrong trumpet, and Wynton Marsalis comes with his own mouthpiece, and I was worried that he would put his mouthpiece on the old trumpet and it wouldn't fit, and there I would be like an hour before he's supposed to play, running to Home Depot to find some connector parts. But as it were, other guys in the band had a connector.